Welcome. I'm Jerry Swift. This is Al Gooderham with Scottsdale Fire, and I also want to thank all of our regional partners that are going to participate in this year's fourth quarter ladder drill. We are going to go over some of the different workaround techniques when working with some of the exotic steels made in today's vehicles. Today we're going to be cutting on a brand new Audi A3. We have our rear door off on the Audi A3. One thing I want to stress is maximizing tool time. So here I already have my spreader in hand. I pop the door open. Next thing I look at, if I'm not doing the B-post blowout, are going to be my hinges. Two types of hinges. I'm either going to have recessed or exposed. Exposed hinges, I know I can wrap my cutter blades around it and just sever them off. Recessed hinges are always going to be recessed up against the door skin itself, and it's very hard to wrap your cutter blades around it. Extrication 101, we don't want to use our cutter tips to try to sever something. We want to wrap it and pull it into the notch, the strongest part of the cutter. So when you think about maximizing tool time, I already have my spreader in hand. So one thing I can do is stick my spreader in and create a 4 to 6 inch opening. And what that does is I started with recess, now I create exposed hinges. Now, I could go ahead and just blow the door off because quickest, fastest tool, I'm already here with my spreader to achieve that. But if I run into a problem, workaround technique, that I create that 4 to 6 inch opening and I can come back in with my cutter and keep moving forward. So we went ahead and just spread our hinges off. Now you can see the weakest part of the hinges itself is going to be that pivot joint, but nothing from the B-post to the joint was affected in that spread. Just to give you an idea of the metals that they're using nowadays and how structurally sound they are. The next step we're going to do is, in the event, and we went ahead and took the door off just so it's easier to see. On a B-post blowout, when you come in to cut as low as you can, parallel with the rocker channel, depending on the opening and the size of tool that you're using, sometimes you can't get it as parallel as you want. You got to lift the butt end of the tool up and cut on an angle. And when you're placing that cut, because the structurally sound of the hinges, you want to stay away from wrapping your cutter blades around them because you'll get a lot more cutter twist. So when you make that cut and you put your spreader in to blow out the bottom of that B-post, if for whatever reason your cut's not deep enough and the B-post isn't swinging out once you apply your spreader, we're going to show you option B by putting a ram in place on how to sever the bottom of the B-post. So Al made his relief cut on the bottom of the B-post. Now it's simulated that the spreader can't get the bottom of the B-post to flip out. So we're gonna go use a ram. Now, a couple different placements we can use. We could, if need be, we can push off the door jamb itself and push it in, and you could sever it parallel, or we could push off the transmission tunnel with your ram in place on the bottom of the B-post and push it all out. I've had the most success with this option. Now, depending on the make of the transmission tunnel and how much stability that you have with the bottom of your B-post, you very well could send the bottom of your ram through the transmission tunnel. So if that happens, you can disperse the weight with a 4x4. It's best to use wood because with the aggressive tips on your rams, it will seat itself inside the wood instead of slip off like it will with turtle plastics. And you just wedge it in between the seat and the transmission tunnel. So we're gonna start by seeing if the transmission tunnel will hold up during our push, and if it doesn't, then we'll apply our 4x4. So we have the bottom of the B-post severed away from the rocker channel, and you can see it didn't come easy. The integrity of our transmission tunnel held up perfectly, which was very nice. Some things I want to point out, through the video you can hear all the different popping, high pinging noises that you hear. That's the metal catastrophically failing, coming apart. High strength steel and your ultra strength steels and all your exotic metals, they don't like to tear. They just catastrophically come apart. So things to keep in mind that when you're operating your tools, the car will tell you a lot about what you're dealing with. And it could help you down the road with tool choice moving through your evolution. So some of the components that we cut, just to give you an idea, there are times when we would have to do a blind cut. We always can't see exactly what our cutter's wrapping, even though in theory we try to stay away from that. But in reality, we do it every day. So you can see this seatbelt bracket, the amount of steel and reinforcement that it has. So this was one portion of the top of the B-pillar. And you can see that this is only a 3-ply B-pillar. Okay, the cutter went through it pretty easily, but this is only 3-ply. You will see as much as 8 to 9-ply out in the field on some of your higher end Audis, Mercedes, BMWs. So tool choice is pretty important. And that's why at the regional level, we thought it was a good idea to come out and show you guys, if you get yourself backed into a corner, how can you still achieve the objective utilizing a good rescue plan that consists of 4 different components, plan A, B, C, and D. Another workaround technique, in the event you wanted to flip the roof. In fourth quarter last year, we talked about doing the roof flip. It's a double cut, about a 4-inch segment out of the top of your A-post. You bring your spreader in and you lift up and you'll gain 14 to 16 inches above the patient's head in about 20 seconds. Another option we have is if you utilize long rams, we can double cut the C-post, single cut on the A-post, stick your ram in place, and I can get anywhere from 25 to 35 inches above the patient's head. Now where this is applicable is if I needed to do some type of roof ops, but I have limited access to the other side of the vehicle, which making the relief cuts in those posts in order to remove the roof isn't an option, this is how you can work around that. So we have our roof flipped up. You could see during the movement that the rear lifted first before the front did. The reason for that is we needed a tearing to happen with the front windshield. So once it started to tear and let loose, then we got an equal lift with it. Ram placement on this, you can go more towards the rear if you want to capture and maintain the height that you created. You can go in the center like I did, or you can even go in the front if need be. I prefer away from the patient, so in the event I needed all this lift, I can leave the tool in place and I still have room to work. Next step would be getting the patient out. You can do seat backs where you're cutting the seat brackets. Now, something to keep in mind, these are power seats where it's going to have double bracketing on both sides. It's very hard to get to that bracket with the center console in place where it's at. That's going to be a judgment call when you get there. It can be done, but it can be difficult. One thing that I stress too is when you're involved or you get on scene of a vehicle and it still has electrical power, adjusting the seat in position that's going to aid your extrication might be another step to think about. So we removed our front door, our front fender, lifted our front hood so you can see the landmarks. Now this particular Audi does not have some of the construction added features like you'll find on your Audi A6 and your Audi A8. But you can see that all the manufacturers are going to a square tubular design, which increases the integrity tremendously. Now, the front frame rail, as it's stamped in place, narrows out as it goes towards the front of the car. On your Audi A6 and your Audi A8, you will also have a cross member square design that acts almost like a truss system. So when we're doing our cut behind the front strut, pivot point for your dash, we're going to make 2 cuts with the top cut going all the way through into the firewall. And then we manipulate this metal out. That's our void space for our spreader tips in order to lift. Now, one thing that I've noticed is when you come across cars that are well built, the larger the cut you make, the better the dash lift you get. Meaning, the smaller the hole, when I stick my spreader in, we know that spreader works on an arch, So if I drop the butt end of my spreader down, I'll end up pulling it out instead of lifting it up. If I have my butt end of my spreader too high, I'll actually push it in to the compartment space where the patient is. So the larger the hole, more room for air with your placement and angle of your spreader. So we're gonna go through the steps now and see what kind of dash lift that we get. And we'll talk about if certain problems exist, how to work around them. The sequence of cuts that we did is your typical modified dash lift. Now, something I want to point out is it can be very difficult at times to get that cut to go all the way into the firewall where we want, into the wheel well, which will eventually tear into the firewall. So with that being said, it might be faster and better for the patient in the long term because of faster extrication is to go ahead and manipulate this little piece out with your spreader to give you the room to fit your cutter blades in there to cut it. Another workaround option, in the event your cutter can't wrap or cut the top of your B-pillar, you can stick a large ram in place and sever the roof line from your B-post by just pushing up. Before you start your push, you want to make sure that you still crib or shore underneath where your ram base is going to be, just to reinforce it, so you put all the pressure in order to sever the top of the B-post. So when you're looking at the anatomy, because of rollover, the top of the B-post is always going to be more stout than the bottom of the B-post. So more likely, if you're going to have a cutter that's going to have issues cutting anything, it's always going to be one of your posts, and it's going to be at the top. Now, the A-pillar is actually reversed. It's more beefy at the bottom and then increases as it reaches the top. So if you do have a hollow boron bar that's inside your A-post, it's going to narrow out. So if you're trying to cut in the center of the A-post and are unsuccessful, if you go directly up against the roof line, usually if that bar is present, it stops 2 inches before the roof line. So you always have a better success there. Some other options if you can't cut the post is you can also pie cut either your posts and just cut into the roof line. Just always remember you want to make sure that it's a safe cut zone, looking for airbag inflators. So that's another option. Another workaround technique that instead of doing a modified dash lift or a dash roll, you could stick your spreader in, grab the ring of your steering wheel and capture your A-post and squeeze them together, and it could also lift your steering wheel off the patient if need be. It's quick and it's effective. So when we had our large ram in place to sever the bottom of that B-post, you can see the two different places I bedded my ram. Now, if you are going to use your conjunction to bed your ram, it's a good idea to always keep it in line with your hinges. You could see the difference in the crush that I got between the hinge and just hollow space in my conjunction. Now, this support that we have that goes from conjunction to conjunction, sometimes they go from A-post to A-post, and they always tie in to the transmission tunnel. Now this can very well be an aid in your modified dash lift or your dash roll. So now you got to clear away some plastic, which can be time consuming. But once I put my ram in place, and if I'm able to capture this with my ram head, I'll get that dash roll every single time. So something to consider. From Jerry and Al at Scottsdale Fire, we want to thank you for viewing this video. And stay tuned, we're also going to be sending out a PowerPoint about advanced metals as well. So hopefully it will bring it all full circle in what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis out in the field. And always remember the cardinal rule, be safe.